Okay, right. So this one is going to be called the Orb. I said I wasn't going to go through titles. This was just so obvious. I was going to call it this title, so I might as well go through that. So this one, how it starts then is I'm lying down in my bed, not to go to sleep, just sort of lying on top of the bed, but me and my wife, and I think we're watching TV or something like that. It's clearly late afternoon into early evening, and the sun is just going down. Okay, so we do actually have sunsets, more sort of summertime, that we can see out of our window easily. Really nice one sometimes, but this was going down, but and the sun coming into the room was a really abnormal amount of sun. It was a lot more than we would normally see. It just because it completely lit the room up orange with the amount of light that was coming in. So it kind of made me get up and just kind of look, just out of curiosity, really. And I was able to look at the sun, despite being incredibly bright, and not be, and it wasn't sort of hurting my eyes to look at the sun at all. But what I was seeing was the last few moments of the sun just dipping below the horizon. So, that kind of more of an orangey tone that you get to the sun just as it's lower down on the horizon anyway. And I was just watching it just come down below the horizon. Now, what I'd mentioned about the horizon itself is it was very different to the reality of what our horizon looks like looking out of our window. We were still very much in our house looking out the window. So that was all the same. It was just that the actual landscape itself was quite a bit different. So where we've just got standard residential houses, pretty much as far as you can see, and there's a couple of big-ish, big by UK standards, sort of apartment blocks, which are probably sort of like 10, 15 stories, something like that. We've got a couple of those that are in the background. But in this one, it was more far bigger buildings, far bigger buildings, kind of like 50 stories sort of thing. And it was dotted around. So there was quite a few around. So it was almost more like I suppose, a bit more like a commercial landscape that I was seeing, like a city centre is what it looked like. And what I was seeing was I was actually watching the sun go down, and it's just going down between, like two of these big buildings. I was just seeing it sink down just below, in between these two buildings. Where did I get to? Yeah, and my eyesight when I was looking at these was almost like binocular vision. So I've mentioned this in dreams before, where, as an example, I had a nuclear missile one, and I see the missile going across, and then it's almost like my eyesight then just jumps into like super zoomed in, and my eyes were tracking it, and I was tracking it the whole way in that one. That's one that just comes to mind, but there's quite a few I describe as having somewhat sort of binocular vision. And this was exactly the same, so I was kind of like zoomed right in. Now, I'm not sure whether this is actually to do with my phone. I'm not sure if I was actually on my phone and I was kind of like, zooming in, pinching it, and zooming in a little bit. But I think what happens is I end up deciding to film it for some bizarre reason. Not sure why. I mean, it's just a sunset. But yeah. So there we go. As the sun is going below the horizon, in a predictable fashion, it's slowly just creeping down. But just as it's about to drop below the horizon, literally just at the moment you're expecting it just to come down. I think probably about 2/3 of, let's say roughly 2/3 of the sun now was below the horizon. Roughly, just as a rough kind of figure. Just as it's about to drop, it suddenly then just stopped going down, just suddenly froze, which is obviously abnormal given I'd been watching it come down at a predictable rate, and it just decided to stop. And then it instantaneously changed into a moon, which was very bizarre, obviously, because you're staring at a sun and it's all orange and beaming, and then suddenly it turns to a sort of a light grey with obviously all the craters and stuff. I could see all that sort of stuff. It just suddenly changed instantaneously into this moon. And then the moon just kind of hung there for a moment, just with that sort of roughly that 1/3 exposed. When this sort of switch happened, and I actually called my wife over and showed her this moon, both the sun and basically both the sun and when it changed to the moon was far larger than normal as well. So it was quite a bit bigger. than we would normally see. But tough to gauge, actually, because I had this zoomed in view. It was really sort of tough for me to describe what kind of size it was, but it did seem bigger than normal, certainly larger than normal. But yeah, I couldn't tell you the direct scale until something else sort of happens. But yeah, I could pick out all the craters. It appears larger than normal, larger than I've ever seen it before as a moon. It was just far, far bigger than I've ever seen a moon before. Yeah, I put here, I think I got my camera out at this point. It may well be at this point, as I'm sort of seeing this at this binocular vision, I decided to start filming it because it's obviously weird, very abnormal, or whether I had it already and that's why I had that binocular vision. So not sure, not 100% sure. Yeah, so then what happened was this moon that, as I said, it's got about 1/3 exposed, very, very roughly, then starts to kind of grow in size. So it's not necessarily that it's rising up, it's actually also expanding in size. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And obviously we're concerned because now that it was already clearly strange that the sun just suddenly transformed into a moon in exactly the same spot in the sky, which doesn't make any sense at all. And it just instantaneously changed. And then, but then obviously now it started to expand, then that was way more of a concern, because it grew and it grew and it grew till when I was looking out the window, I mean, if I was to sort of get an idea of the scale of this thing, it was absolutely massive. It was taking up about 50% of my entire view. So it was to the point where it felt like the moon was almost touching the Earth. It was that close. I put here 50 to 75% of the sky. I mean, I don't think it was quite as much as 75, but it was a huge proportion of the sky, of my field of view, obviously. Yeah, this absolutely massive moon so close. Yeah, it looked like it was going to collide with Earth, and the scenery now looked so insignificant in comparison to this moon. It was just obviously dominating the entire skyline. And of course, making out the craters and everything about the moon was just so much easier, but obviously incredibly scary, because now you're thinking the moon is going to crash into the Earth. What is going on? And then what starts to get incredibly bizarre is, as I see this incredibly close moon, it then morphs into a sphere. So it was obviously spherical already in shape, but now it kind of gets rid of all the craters and everything, and it's just a very smooth orb. But it's metallic looking, very, very metallic looking. So it looks like, yeah, like a smooth metal orb. And it's still the same size. So again, it's just this, like the sun changed into the moon, like that. It just like completely changed. This was the same. So it got massive, and then it just changed, and it's suddenly it's now this grey, light grey sort of orb that's replaced the moon. I hurried out of the bedroom and ran into actually our children's bedrooms to collect them, so that we could just be together, because obviously something was going on here that was incredibly significant. But also so they could see it with us as well. It was just so that they could witness this at the same time. Obviously, this was a huge event, and that we kind of wanted them to see it as well. So my two children, they quickly made their way from their bedrooms across to our room. Our kind of area between the rooms is very, very small. It is like, well, I don't need to give you the measurements. It's very, very small. So the distance they need to travel from their bedrooms to our bedrooms is almost nothing. So they very, very quickly came into our room. But as they were going past me, I just suddenly had this in-dream, open-eyed vision where I was seeing this orb. It was a completely different setting, so it wasn't where I was seeing it at all. It's I was seeing it somewhere else completely, and it was just this orb was levitating, obviously, and it was zooming around, and I was kind of behind it, I suppose, kind of like tracking with it as it's zooming around this, all these different. What would you call it? Sort of like backgrounds and stuff, going past, there's like green grass, and I can't remember quite, but it was all out. It was in outside, but it was zooming around all these different areas. And I wasn't really sure, I wasn't really understanding from this vision what I was meant to be seeing. I wasn't really understanding what it was trying to communicate. It was a bit confusing. So that's all that I really saw in that little orb bit, just zooming around and doing things. And then I kind of like snapped out of this trance, and then because I'd just been standing there, obviously I was just open-eyed, seeing this crazy vision that was going on. Everything else around me had just completely gone. You know, I was just in a vision, just standing there still, while obviously the kids had already gone past me and they'd gone into our bedroom with my wife, standing there. So as I go snap out of this trance, then I walked back into the bedroom, and that orb that I'd seen, that was absolutely massive, dominating the vast majority of the skyline, was now actually levitating and outside of our bedroom window. And oh, sorry, no, in that vision, sorry, while I was having that vision, it had come over, but it had actually changed into something else. So obviously I keep seeing this morphing of one thing changing to another, changing to another, changing to another. Now this is so incredibly bizarre. But yeah, this silver looking grey metallic orb had now morphed again, and from the bedroom door, I'm looking in to our bedroom and seeing both my wife kind of holding our children with her back to that window where we had been looking out the window before. And what we saw from, what I saw as I came into the bedroom, was so bizarre. It's so incredibly bizarre. It was identical to Super Mario Brothers, Super Nintendo. There is one of the characters within that, part of the scenery, that's a kind of like a live thing, that's a character within it, is called a chain chomp. Okay, a chain chomp. I've drawn my little pictures, which I'm going to show you in a moment, just so you can kind of visualize what this looked like. Obviously, I'll just Google chain chomp. There's loads of different ones, but again, you'll see it from my picture. But this kind of, again, remembering it was an orb before, now this orb has changed to black and it's turned into this chain chomp, which I'm going to show you in a moment. But it had these sharp teeth, and if you imagine, it's kind of like lunging and snapping out of the window, and that's obviously where my wife has just turned its back on this thing. It's now practically touching the window, this thing as well. So it's reduced in size, obviously, because of before it was absolutely gigantic. So that's what I meant by this in-between bit. I'm pretty sure there was an in-between bit where that orb actually changed in size as it got closer to us, to still a very large size, but it was outside the window. And this, maybe that's what I saw in the vision, I'm not sure. But then as I came into the room, it had changed again. So yeah, so it changed into this chain chomp thing. Yeah, just snapping at the window, snapping its jaws. Yeah, my wife, as I said, my wife and my girls had turned their back on it completely, paying it no attention whatsoever, either in fear or in some sort of an attempt to pay it no attention. So maybe it would leave us alone. A little bit like a T-Rex, I guess, in Jurassic Park, just stand still. After seeing this chain chomp, I asked for my phone back, because I think my wife was doing the filming or something. And I started filming again. So obviously we had all this on camera, this crazy stuff that was happening. And it was obviously so people would believe us. If we got it on film, then hopefully people would believe us. Now, I'm going to show you my amazing pictures. This sort of stuff you'd want to frame and put on your wall. So I'm going to pause it for a second, flip it around so you can see what I saw. There you go. Amazing. Okay, so you can see my little picture there of my wife holding my children. They are actually quite a lot older than that as well. So again, it was almost like they were much younger than normal. So my children now are like 15 and 12. So, they're not too far off our height. So especially my 15-year-old is about the same height as my wife, actually taller than my wife. So yeah, it wasn't. That's how it looked. So it was like they were younger children, really. But you see here, this is the chain chomp. So if you imagine that as a black face with kind of metal teeth and a chain on it, and it's lunging at the window, and that's kind of what it looks like, more sort of close up. So very, very, very bizarre. So that was chomping away at the window. Right, I'm going to flip it back again. Hopefully that's about the same position. So yes, I was looking. So as I was looking at the screen of my phone, so as I mentioned, now I'm filming this, and I'm looking at the screen of my phone. Like where you, it's funny in a way, but it sort of reminds me of like you go to a pop concert or something like that, and you're filming it, and you're looking more at your phone than you're actually looking at the person in real life. It was kind of like that. I was looking through the phone at something that is actually right in front of me anyway, but I'm filming it. And as I'm filming it, I'm starting to see things change again. It's morphing again. So while I'm recording, it changes from this chain chomp, which looks like it's obviously in trying to intimidate us, and it morphs into this sort of devious-looking version of me. It's almost like it found a picture of me on my phone and copied it and then changed it. I mean, I know that doesn't make sense. I'm standing right there, so I mean, it can see me and just kind of look at me and morph into this version of me. But that's basically what happened. So I was then basically looking back at myself, which was so bizarre. So I'm looking back at this other version of myself, and it's got kind of like, crazy wide eyes and this really creepy horror film like kind of smile, where you're just like, whoa, puts you a bit on edge, because it looks like a really unnatural smile, and the eyes again look really sort of menacing. So as I said, it looked like a crazy version of me. So it was almost like it was portraying the evil side of me. It was like a mirror of me. I don't know. Again, it reminded me of a film I watched when I was a lot younger, called Evil Dead. And there's a few different films, and there's one of them, I'm not sure which one it is. It's the second one or the third one, where this demonic spirit actually creates a double of the main character, and they end up sort of punching each other, and all sorts of weird stuff happens. But it was like a crazy, crazy demonic version of that person, the main character. And that's what this was like. It was like a demonic version of me. It was very, very strange. Wide smile. Wide smiles, wild-looking eyes, and as it morphed, it was reducing in size. So obviously, this chain chomp, again, as you saw in the picture, was up against the window and kind of like chomping at the window. But as it was changing, it was kind of shrinking down, because it was no longer flying or anything like that, because it was me. So it had to create this, I guess, something that's maybe a bit more realistic. I don't know. But what happened was, the position of where this thing was now just moved. So it had kind of come down. So where I was standing, as again, I'm standing at the door to our room, is I can't see it now. It's dropped below the window line. So I walk over and get a bit closer to see what's going on. And we all kind of get quite close to the window, and we're sort of looking down now. Okay. And what we saw was, again, a version of me, and I had a ladder up against the wall, and this ladder couldn't reach our window. It wasn't big enough for that. And so there was this version of me that we're filming that's lunging out, reaching out to try and get to this window again. But as I'm filming all of this, I started to, while I'm seeing it, this demonic version of me pouring at the window and stuff, trying to desperately stretch to get in through the window. We were completely out of reach. There was just no way it was going to get to us. But it started to speak to us, and I noticed as it was speaking to us as well, not that I remember what was said or anything like that. I noticed that the skin of this being started to change. And again, this is me looking through the phone. I'm looking through the phone in front of me like this, and as I'm looking at it and filming it and looking up and filming it, I'm seeing it a little bit more zoomed in, you see, is I'm starting to see the skin on this thing change. And its eyes started to change as well. And it started to look even more demonic looking. I mean, I think it was that it was kind of like, like the round your eyes. I think it was around the eyes. It was starting to get like super, super like dark looking, almost like where you'd put makeup on or something like that. But the eyes were starting to get darker, and the skin was all starting to get greenish, just a greenish shade of skin that was just kind of increasing the amount of green. Really, really bizarre. And it was, yeah, I mean, obvious already, but I put here just it was supernatural. I mean, obviously it was supernatural, but yeah, that was weird. Yeah, because it did, the version of me was not quite like me, so it was kind of taller, thinner, and it reminded me, actually, again back to Mario Brothers, was that you had, what's it called? You've got Mario, haven't you? And you've got the other version, which is called Wario, and then you have Luigi, and then you have another version which is called Waluigi. Well, this character looks a lot like Waluigi. So if you look that up online and see Waluigi, what it looks like, it looked very similar to that. Yeah, like a lanky, kind of longer version. That saved me. Very weird. Yeah, that makes me think of another film as well. A film called Legion, which is, again, it's a horror film, but it's all about the demonic as it goes. And you've got all these people that have been taken over by demons, and there's this one guy who's in in an ice cream van or something. He creepily comes up with an ice cream van, music playing and stuff, and he's got really long legs. It was similar to that. It had longer than normal legs. Looked very, very weird. Yeah, clearly evil looking is what it looked like. And I actually, in the dream, I then started rebuking this thing, because I knew this was demonic at this point. When all these things are changing, and I'm seeing me change into things, I was instantly thinking this is demonic. So I started rebuking this thing, saying, get out of here, this kind of thing, in Jesus' name, leave us, all of that kind of stuff, commanding it to leave. And I was shouting really loud at it out of the window. But that's basically how that dream ended. Okay, so I just put a quick transparency statement in here. So, is there anything that could have influenced my dreams? Not watched anything to do with the sun, the moon, nothing to do with orbs, nothing to do with impersonations. It was completely random. Where Mario related stuff came in, that was really bizarre. No idea. As I said, also because you had the change on, but you also had this Waluigi kind of thing coming in. Again, not seeing anything to do with Mario, even remotely recently. And I've not seen anything to do with deceptions or anything to do with the sky or anything. There's nothing at all that could have influenced that dream that would change the course of that at all. Very, very bizarre. So my thoughts, it was actually a lot packed into a short dream. I mean, despite me obviously, talking it through quite slowly, just to get all the detail out, it was all over quite quickly, really. If you think about it, I'm lying down, I get up, sun starts going down, changes into a moon then expands until it's massive, and then I go into this, it turns into an orb thing, I go into a trance, and then all this starts happening. So it all went through quite quick. And I do find that a lot of the dreams that I have like this, not that I've had one like this really, but they tend to be quite quick dreams. But anyway, so a lot of stuff packed in. So the thoughts on the skyline were related to the skyline being different. Not sure why that would be the case at all. Oh yeah, but I did write out a dream quite recently, which I've yet to actually film, which is a really, really bizarre one. That's got weird stuff in the sky again. So I'd written out a dream that was about bizarre stuff in the sky, and then this happens. There is an element of that which is also like an orb shape, let's say. So whether that could have had any kind of influence on it, maybe. But I mean, this is completely different to what I saw in the sky. in the other one, which maybe I'll do next, actually, so that we've got these sort of side by side. But I'll see, see if there's anything other ones that come up. But yeah, so my yeah. Yeah, okay. I'm trying to think what to say because I don't want to go and get into the other dream because I've mentioned stuff saying, oh, it's really similar to that other dream, so I don't really want to get into that too much. But yeah, okay. Elements that I found interesting about this other dream that I'm sort of starting to talk about is the skyline was different in that one as well. So the skyline in this other dream was at my childhood home rather than my current home. And where we used to live, I would say we had tall oak trees that were probably about 60 feet, maybe a bit more, around about 60, I would say. It was almost twice the height of houses or relatively close to that. They were very, very big. And that's where I've mentioned in the past, actually, how I've had dreams about the sun beam. Well, no, actually, reality. I had reality where the sun was beaming into my room, and that I felt the heat of the sun on my chest, and I couldn't quite get how I had so much light coming in because we had these thick oak trees. It's like, how did all this sun come through? But anyway, in that dream, what happens is the skyline is completely different. So there is no trees there where there was in reality, and it was a completely open skyline, which is like we've got now. So yeah, that was quite a bit different. But what was, I may mention it on the other dream, but weirdly, obviously in that other dream, I've got this skyline is completely clear of trees, and then I think it's within days, our neighbours had like conifer trees and pines and stuff like that were roughly about 20 feet. And days after that dream, they got cut down to about 6 foot, about the height of like your fence panels and stuff like that. But the whole time we've been here for 10 years, they have been really big, and they've actually cut off quite a bit of the skyline from our view, which used to be good because then we had less people looking onto our bedroom. So when you're getting dressed and stuff, you don't have to worry, because you haven't got anyone who's overlooking you, because as I mentioned, we've got this allotment that is covering most of our kind of field of view. And the windows that are facing towards us, they're like 100 meters away or more. So no one's going to really see you getting into getting dressed and stuff like that. But all the ones that were close to us and facing us, they had this tree line that would stop people from looking at us. But that's all cut down now. So we have to be very cautious about getting ready in the morning and the evenings and stuff like that, which is difficult to undo a habit of 10 years of feeling, that you could just get changed, not worry about things. Anyway, back into this dream. So yeah, I didn't really have any thoughts. Other than me sort of thinking about how it was similar in small, very, very small aspects to this other dream I've yet to film. There wasn't really anything that I could think of what it meant, straight out of it. But I did start thinking, well, I've had a lot of sun and moon dreams. I've had a lot of them. A lot of ones with really big moons, a lot of them with big suns, oversized suns and moons, twin moons, twin suns, planets in the sky and stuff like that. I've had loads of stuff, a lot of stuff. And sometimes I put it down to deception. Sometimes I've just put it down to signs in the sky. But just in my general thinking, I sort of thought of the sun. And I thought of something, actually. Well, I say I thought of something. I was watching a video last night, actually, which was completely unrelated to this. But it was talking about, it was the switch that just, when you're listening to something and suddenly something just catches your ear. Well, this just caught my ear was because the person whose YouTube channel was talking about the Essenes calendar. So this is like the calendar that was used as an accurate way of, obviously, I won't go into the detail of it. There's some brilliant books on it, which I may well cite actually in this, that talk about the Essene calendar, how it works. So it doesn't work on a 365.25 day year like we have right now with the Gregorian calendar. Getting a bit tongue-tied there. So it works on a very different basis. So it's, I think it might be, I can't remember exactly. It might be something like 360 days. I mean, the prophetic calendar that you see in the Bible is 360 days. I'm pretty sure that, I'm pretty sure that it's mentioned in the Bible, but the calendars used to be 360 days, but then they changed with various calendars that came afterwards. The calendar that they use in Israel is very, very different to ours as to what the year is and all that kind of stuff. Very, very different to this other calendar. But sorry, getting back to it, what actually caught my ear was he was talking about this YouTuber was talking about how, they children of Israel, they used to use this particular calendar system, which meant that every time it was your birthday, for example, if you were born on a Wednesday, your birthday is always on a Wednesday forever. It never changes. Whereas obviously with our calendar, it does. Every year it changes, doesn't it, by a day, or sometimes two, depending on the year. Whereas with this, it doesn't. It's always exactly the same. And using this calendar, then all major events like major festivals and stuff like that, they're always on the same day. Months start on the same day. I think it is Wednesday. I seem to remember something like that. And so they didn't use a lunar calendar. They used a solar calendar. Okay. Now they did switch to a lunar calendar, and when they switched to a lunar calendar, it started to cause problems. And that's what it made me think of, is the sun that suddenly switches to a moon. Was it talking about that in some way? Because I've not really heard of anything like that. Well, I have heard of it because I've read the books that these three YouTubers put together, but I hadn't really heard it anywhere else, let's say. And it just kind of stuck out, in me hearing that. So whether there's anything to do with that, I don't know, because in the calendar changing, actually no, I won't go into anything like that. But as I said, what I'll do is I'll look to put in some book titles that you can go check out, that I've read, and the YouTube video as well. I'll put in there. So just write my note. That's why the screen was wobbling a little bit. But I was also thinking to myself, I don't know why I thought this really, was Jesus was referred to as the Son, wasn't he? Obviously the Son as in S-O-N, but also S-U-N, and it wasn't a mistake. So I'm just going to read through some of these, or at least cite the scriptures that this talks about. So because Jesus and God have been referred to as the Son a few times. So Malachi 4:2 says Son of Righteousness, and that as in S-U-N of righteousness, to describe the Messiah. It's no spelling mistake at all. The words of Son, S-U-N in the English, and S-O-N are spelt completely different in the original language, which for Malachi would have been Hebrew. So the Old Testament is majority Hebrew. Job is in Aramaic, isn't it? I think there might be another one, I don't know, but I think it's predominantly all Hebrew. And then obviously in the New Testament is all Greek, and then that's been translated from there. But in the Hebrew, Sun, as in the burning thing we have in our sky, is Shemesh, S-H-E-M-E-S-H for sun. And for actual son, to be the son of somebody, is Ben. So when you hear Ben this, Ben that, it means son of. B-E-N is son for S-O-N. Also in the Greek, you have Helios for son, so H-E-L-I-O-S. And then to be someone's son is Huios, H-U-I-O-S. So they're very, very, very different. So you wouldn't make the mistake in any kind of transcribing, from one language to another, that was not a spelling mistake, that was intentional. Okay. Also in Psalm 84:11, it states, for the Lord God is a sun, S-U-N, and shield. And of course you've got John 1, which is verses 4-9, speaking of John the disciple and Jesus. In him was life, and life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So not the word sun, but relating to light and that kind of thing in the same sort of context is why I mentioned that. Yeah, sorry. And to carry on that verse, so there was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. Yeah, so I put, now think about it, in the dream, despite the sun going down, there was still light. Yeah, so that was one of the things that just sort of struck me. So obviously we saw this sun coming down, and obviously the sun's coming down, then it turns to a moon. Well, if it's a moon, it would be dark, right? Because all you've got is the light that's reflecting off of the moon. Well, that for us is nighttime, so it's very, very dark. But that didn't happen. So the sun was coming down, it was super, super bright. It stayed as daytime, even though that sun turned into a moon. So it was a deception. Clearly it was a deception. So I saw it as a false light. Now, when you start looking at that as a false light, so that sun that was coming down was all a deception. If you start thinking about that as a false light, the real light was obviously somewhere else, wasn't it? That was lighting up the sky. So this then made me think of 2 Corinthians 11:14, where it says Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. And when you hear that word masquerades, you think, well, that's exactly what's happening. It was a sun that was changing to a moon, that was changing to an orb, that was changing to a chain chomp, that was changing to me. So it was masquerading. It was not its true self, was it? Because it was shape-shifting into different things. So that scripture of using masquerading, stuff like that, couldn't be more accurate, really. Appearing as light at first, yeah, and of course, and then morphing into these other things. Also made me think of Revelation 13, verses 13-14, where it speaks of the beast of the end times, and it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of people. Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast, who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. So that's a really, really famous scripture, that one, where people talk about the beast that gets wounded, so maybe dies, and then so it's like a false resurrection sort of thing, or not. Maybe what I mean is emulating that resurrection. Yeah. But this also made me think of something else. So going back to this and what you were seeing, okay? So again, back to that scripture, and it performed signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of people. So think of that. So again, this is not me saying this is true, but this is just an explanation that kind of made sense in my mind. Was, well, the fire coming down from heaven to earth, I would have said probably the majority of people would then, the imagery that they would think of immediately is of Elijah, calling down fire from heaven that burned up, these armies of people that were coming for him. Does it mean that? Yeah, I mean, it certainly could do, because it's not saying, because hopefully you see where I'm going with this. So if you're talking about fire coming down from heaven, well, you could kind of call the sun fire, isn't it? It is a ball of fire, and that it's coming down from heaven, and it's in full view of people. So if someone was able to, given power to perform signs and wonders, if you saw one sun that's lighting up the sky, but then you see another sun, and you've got someone who's gonna say, I'm gonna do something miraculous that no one else can do. I'm gonna call the sun down. I'm going to call it right down now. then people would go, well, this has got to be God, hasn't it? So this is just me reading into it. I don't think that the scripture is actually saying that, but it was just this interesting place that my mind went to when I was thinking about causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of people. Well, if it was the sun, a lot of people are going to see the sun, aren't they? So that would be the sort of thing that a huge amount of people would see. Again, hear me again. I'm not saying that that's true. I'm not saying that I've found some secret knowledge in there. I'm not saying that at all. I'm really not. But it was just interesting how that kind of went in my mind. And I was thinking about fire coming down from heaven and performing signs and stuff like that. And if you did have somebody who did that, clearly they are going to start building statues and things for you, aren't they? The sun being brought down to the earth, causing fire. Yeah, come down from heaven in full view of people, a sight causing people. Everyone could see it. Well, the close to half the earth would, wouldn't they? Seeing it coming down. Yeah. I also put about lightness being replaced by darkness as well. Whether that's what it's talking about, the sun going down, and if the sun representing Christ and Christianity, and then the moon rising. Well, you don't need me to explain what the moon represents as far as a world religion, do you? And that it was replaced by the moon. Whether that was a toppling of, it was showing a toppling of the major religions in the world, maybe. Again, no idea. I think that's it. I mean, I did have a confirmation that came up. So I've mentioned that in this series, I've had loads and loads of different confirmations. This is what I consider it to be a confirmation anyway. So when did I? So I'm writing this down into my dream diary, dream journal. The 1st of February 2026. I'm filming it about 2 weeks roughly after it happened. Very, very roughly. I was watching a series. So again, if you were to watch season 1, you would have seen I mentioned how what I was watching on TV, especially series on TV, seemed to connect in perfectly with what was happening with my dream life, to the point where I would write down a dream and then 15 minutes later I'm seeing my dream on screen, watching on TV. This sort of thing happened, but this to a lesser degree, I would say. But I was watching the series called The 100. And this was, so on the 31st of the 1st. So I didn't actually tell you when this dream happened, did I? The dream happened on the 30th of the 1st. Then on the 31st in the evening, so the next day evening, we're watching the 100, and I think we're starting a new season, something like that. So I've written down here, it was season 6, episode 3, somewhere towards the end. I tried to find it actually on the TV, but the thing is because it's Amazon Prime and I've just got the standard thing, it's just relentless adverts and stuff. And I thought, wouldn't it look crap? If I start filming it and then they throw an advert in just as I'm trying to show you something. So I thought not really any point. So if you want to look it up, feel free. But I'm pretty sure it's season 6, episode 3 towards the end. They've kind of gone to this whole new world, and there's a weird thing about this world, in that they have a sun and a moon, which are side by side, and they have this kind of like this blood moon thing, which is a bit weird. The moon goes like a red color, and it causes people to go nuts, completely mad, and they start stabbing each other and all sorts. They just go completely crazy. And there's also a swarm of like locust kind of things that swarm around and attack people, and stuff. There's parts of that series that have got a very biblical undertone to it. There's other bits where there's this kind of Christ-like character as well, and they all wear white robes, and he's known as being called the shepherd, and there's loads of elements of it. And sometimes when you watch these things, you're kind of like, are you mocking Christianity? Are you taking things from it? What are you trying to do? And bizarre. And I mean, you see it in films, you see it all over the place. A lot of the time it's mocking, and you kind of think, well, what is the, why are you doing this? What is your motive towards this? But they weren't particularly nice. They talk about some sort of like judgment day where everyone's dying and they have to make a decision, and it's basically a judgment day. Is right towards the end, but anyway. But in this particular one, so again, I think this season 3 one is where you see at some point you see these two, the big sun and the moon. They're equal size, and it creates this kind of eclipse thing that happens for a certain period of time. And when that happens, like people chain themselves in rooms and stuff so they don't go around attacking people, something like that. I don't know how long the eclipse is for. But it's a really long one. It's like a day, or might even be more than one day. I can't remember. Don't know whether they put in 3 days, but you never know, do you? Could be. But they, so that was very similar, because obviously what I saw was a moon and a sun of the same size, and they're not eclipsing each other because it was just replacing one another. But you had the moon that went over the top of the sun, sort of thing. So it sort of reminded me of that. But it was not so much that. What you saw on this particular planet was, I think they were a moon and they had a planet, or they were on a planet and they had a huge moon. But it was whatever it was incredibly close. So just like I'd seen it of taking up maybe 50% of the sky based on my field of view, it was almost identical. Where it was, part of it on the horizon, a huge amount of it being, so that you could see roughly half the planet, let's say, was just like I'd seen it, exactly the same scale. So I was like, whoa, that's literally the same as a dream I had yesterday. And then we moved from episode 3 into episode 4. And yeah, that's when it showed the sun and the moon next to each other and stuff like that. The start of this eclipse. I think they did show it in earlier episodes as well, but it was just that it went from that straight into that, and I was like, well, that's literally what I've been dreaming about. Yeah. So as I said, I was planning to show you the 2 scenes, but I mean, you can look it up. If you want to. As I said, Amazon Prime at the moment is available for free. Well, not that Amazon Prime is free, but I mean, you don't have to pay to watch the seasons. But yeah, season 6, episode 3, I think, and into 4 is where you get it. It's certainly season 6. You'll get loads of that kind of stuff coming up. And they have bodies as well that they inhabit, that they live forever in, and all this kind of stuff as well. And it's a false thing, because they end up getting killed. So it's not like they're immortal in that sense, but they move from body to body, and it's this, yeah. Anyway, as I said, there's loads of elements to Christianity and stuff like that in there, loosely. I think that's what I would cover off on this. So hopefully you found it interesting. As I said, a vivid, very, 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 very vivid dream. As I said, on the meaning, I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, I've pointed you towards some scriptures there of Malachi 4:2, Psalm 84:11, John 1:4-9, and we had 2 Corinthians 11-14. I'll cite those in the notes. Revelation 13:13-14 as well. Yeah, I'm not sure on the meaning on this one. So if anybody does have a meaning or thoughts on that, please do put them in the comments. Help guide me as well to what the meaning is. But I tend to find when there's stuff in the sky, it tends to be deception related. It felt very deception related with all the morphing and stuff like that. End times like. As I said, maybe it's a toppling of religions and stuff like that, and that's what it's talking about. Maybe it's literally talking about, as I said, like Revelation 13:13-14. Maybe that's what it's bringing alive as far as the scripture with the fire coming down. I'm really not sure. As I said, I'm often not wedded to ideas, and very open to correction on things if I'm completely wrong. Okay, yeah, I'll leave it there. Okay. As I said, hopefully you found it interesting, and maybe tomorrow now, or maybe a couple of days before I do any kind of more videos. I've got a bit of a busy couple of days. Okay, see you soon.